Today, I want to share my understanding of the subconscious mind. It's such a huge topic that instead of being comprehensive, I'll be very precise. In this video, I'm going to share what it is, how it organises our experiences, how we recognise when it's no longer working in our favour, and what it actually means to rewire it in a way that holds in real life and under pressure. For years, people have spoken about how humans only use 10% of our brain. I heard this a lot when I was growing up. This idea isn't true in a literal neurological way. The truth is we use all of our brain. But it endured because it was pointing to something real. We're aware of only a very small fraction of what actually shapes our experience. Most of what influences our behaviour, our decisions, our influences, and even our sense of self happens below the level of conscious awareness. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is when we talk about the mind, we often talk about it in levels or divisions. For example, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, or the non-conscious or unconscious mind. And this language is useful, but it can also be a little bit misleading because they aren't separate spaces in the mind and they're not places that we can see with an MRI, for example. They're not different divisions or levels of mind in the logical sense. They're ways of describing how one field of awareness is operating from moment to moment, what's immediately known and what's also operating without reflective awareness. To reflect the work of Carl Jung, it's an organised pattern of meaning called complexes. It's a cluster of experience, emotion, memory pathways, and interpretation that form around these themes like safety, belonging, power, self-worth. Unlike the conscious mind, which we do have direct conscious access to, the subconscious mind lies just below that level of immediate awareness. Gosh, there's a lot of use of the word consciousness here. So we have the conscious mind, which we're immediately aware of, and we have the subconscious mind that we're not immediately aware of. It lies just below the level of conscious awareness, but we can access it through intentional conscious awareness. Does that make sense? Golly. Now, the other thing to say is that the subconscious has a completely different level of scale and power to the conscious mind. It is simultaneously registering emotional signals, body sensations, memory associations, relational dynamics, and environmental contexts. And this information is not organised through reasoning or analysis or strategy or planning. It's organised through pattern recognition and pattern continuation. And I find that a really helpful way to understand the power and the scale of the subconscious mind compared to the conscious mind is through this image. Imagine the conscious mind as like a torchlight. So whatever you point the torchlight to, you can light that thing up and then you can see every single detail. You can then make deliberate choices about where to step and where to go. Well, the subconscious mind holds the power of the entire grid of the town. Every street, every junction, and everywhere that you have ever travelled before. So with such a powerful complex within our mind-body system, what could possibly go wrong? Misalignment, that's what goes wrong. The subconscious organises experience by recognising patterns from the past and using them as a guide for the present. It simply follows an internal map that has already been created. The map was formed through lived experience, often early experiences, often experiences that we didn't choose because we were too young, and often when the world looked very different to what it looks like now. And at that time, the map served its purpose. It took us towards safety, belonging, stability, control, and maybe it even provided an internal escape from situations that we couldn't physically leave. And because it worked, it stayed in place. And misalignment happens when life changes, but the map stays the same. Responsibilities shift, capacity grows, identity evolves, and the terrain changes. Yet the subconscious continues to navigate by an older version of the map. So even when the conscious mind has clarity, vision, a plan, a goal, movement, getting there, doing what you say you want to do, can become very hard going and inconsistent. Energy and motivation rise and fall, decisions wobble, and follow through becomes unpredictable and effortful, because there are now two maps in play. The conscious mind is working from a viewpoint of the current terrain, and it uses willpower and determination, the torchlight. The subconscious mind is working from a much vaster map with pattern recognition and the entire power grid. Guess which map gets used? And the system, our system, the mind-body complex, has to work really hard to reconcile these two maps. And it's often experienced through friction, negative self-talk, or things just feeling like they're way more harder than they should be. So what can we do? We can redesign those internal maps. We can rewire the subconscious mind. And the good news is we can do this. And I'm going to share with you what works. So I'm a trained strategic psychotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist, and I've learned from some of the best psychologists in the field. What I've also done is work on rewiring my own mind and the people that I work with privately, and I'm in many communities where we all benefit from this knowledge and from this skill for lasting positive change. There are several ways to rewire your subconscious mind. I'm going to share two of them with you that sit at the core of my work. And then I'm also going to talk about a phase of life that also offers the invitation to make these subconscious changes. One way that the map updates, or we rewire our brain, is through awareness. When a pattern becomes visible, when we bring awareness to it, we can interrupt it. And when we interrupt it repeatedly, a new route then begins to form. Awareness creates choice, pattern disruption creates the movement, and repetition stabilizes the new map. I've taught this process in depth during a 60-minute workshop. It's a step-by-step guide how to do this, and I'll put the link to that workshop in the description of this video. Another way that the map updates is through the process of identity work. We begin identity work by really focusing in on what our values are. In other words, what's important to us. And most people don't know what's truly important to them and what they truly want. They're committed not to the truth in them, but into the narrative that they've made up. For example, that they should be getting that promotion at work. They should be further on in their life by now. They should have a bigger house, a better job, a partner. Self-honesty, honesty with ourselves, can be really, really hard to get to. We tend to listen to that excessive voice of the egoic mind rather than our own true self. And from a very young age, we're conditioned to adapt. When we're learning how the world works, what we often want is immediate, simple. Play, explore, follow curiosity, an ice cream. And we're told we can't have it. We can't do that. We have to behave. So we're kind of made small, and we adapt to being small and not really truly expressing what we want. So as a result, Many internal maps are not designed around our true values. They're designed around adaptation and fitting in. But when we get clear on what we truly want, something quite amazing happens. When we get clear on our values and we align our identity with our values, the values provide the direction and the identity provides the structure. And when identity is built around lived values, purpose stabilizes and self-worth becomes grounded rather than conditional. This is a process that is most powerfully supported by guidance. I do offer a 1-month private container where we work on your values and then we build a stable identity around those values. It becomes one of the most coherent internal maps that a person can create. And lastly, there's a broader context here. And Carl Jung actually spoke about this. In the first half of our life, we're dedicated to carving out our space in the world. We're creating a career, a place for ourselves, maybe even a family, setting ourselves up financially. Questions about meaning and direction, they do arise and they're extremely valuable. But there's other responsibilities and commitments that take priority. But in the second half of life, something does start to shift. Attention starts to turn inward towards meaning, expression, and maybe even the pull of something that wants to be lived. People begin to notice a recurring interest, for example, maybe a project or a vision or something that just doesn't go away. And then they start to ask, what do I really want? What wants to move through me? What is it that I want to share, that I want to express, create? And this is often a time that life just has a different question for us. And it's a time when updating that internal map is not just helpful, but it's necessary because these urges to create and share don't go away. So I hope this has been useful. I hope what I have tried to communicate here landed. And that is that it's not that we only use 10% of our brain. It's that only 10% of it is conscious to us without intention. But with conscious awareness, we can access so much more. We can access that power grid of mind. If you enjoy these conversations, I make a new one roughly every 10 days. Please subscribe, please like, please comment, please share. And this is part of what I'm doing in my second half of life, is I'm sharing what I've learned about the body-mind complex and the nature of reality, how I see it, and it fascinates me. So stay tuned and I will see you next time. Thank you.